Zara Whitmore had just dropped her duffel bag onto the polished marble floor of the entryway when she realized she was completely out of her depth. The house, no, the mansion was nothing like the photos her cousin had sent. This wasn't just a weekend stay. This was stepping into a world that didn't belong to her. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Pacific. A grand piano sat under a chandelier that probably cost more than her entire college tuition, and the faint scent of leather and money lingered like it owned the place. She let out a low whistle. What kind of guy even lives like this? Her cousin Mia had begged her last minute. Just house sit for the weekend, Zara. He's never there. He's off in Europe or Dubai or whatever billionaires do. You'll be alone. Just feed the dog and don't burn the place down. Zara could handle that. She needed the break. After quitting her job at the publishing house and watching her bank account wither, free luxury and a paycheck sounded like a dream. She was supposed to write her novel, not spiral into stress-induced ramen dinners. "All right, Bentley," she said, bending down to greet the golden retriever waiting by the kitchen island. "It's just you and me, buddy." Bentley wagged his tail and trotted ahead as if he owned the mansion. Maybe he did. She explored because how could you not? And found herself standing in front of a wall of wine, the bottles arranged like art. The kitchen was massive, the living room bigger than her entire apartment, and the master bedroom looked like a five-star resort. She stopped short at the walk-in closet. Rows of tailored suits, shoes lined up like soldiers, and watches that probably cost more than her car. She ran her fingers over one of the jackets. Must be nice. The weekend was supposed to be uneventful. She'd raid, right, maybe swim in the infinity pool. But the sound of the front door unlocking Friday evening changed everything. Zara froze in the kitchen, barefoot in leggings and an oversized sweatshirt, holding a mug of tea like it was a shield. She stared toward the front hallway just as footsteps echoed on the marble floor. Then he walked in, tall, broad shoulders. Black coat slung casually over one arm, hair slightly tousled like he'd just gotten off a private jet. And a face that was unfairly attractive, sharp jaw, piercing eyes, a presence that made the air shift. He stopped when he saw her. She swallowed hard. "You must be, not in Europe." He stared at her for a second, then raised a brow. "You're not Mia." "Nope." She set the mug down quickly, trying to sound calm. "I'm her cousin, Zara. She asked me to house sit for the weekend. She said you wouldn't be back." He dropped his coat on the arm of the sofa. "Plans changed." Zara forced a smile. "Right. That happens." There was a pause. Bentley trotted over to him, tail wagging. The man knelt, scratched the dog behind the ears, then looked back at her. "You're staying here, just for the weekend. If that's still okay," she added, nerves kicking in. "I can leave if you don't have to leave," he cut in, "but I don't like surprises." "Neither do I," she muttered under her breath, then cursed herself immediately. To her surprise, he gave the tiniest laugh. "Fair enough." Still, the tension in the air was thick. Zara stood awkwardly near the kitchen island while he moved to the bar and poured himself a drink. She watched, trying not to stare too obviously. He glanced at her again. "I'm Lachlan Rhodes, by the way." Of course he was. Her cousin had mentioned a Mr. Rhodes, but never said he was young or hot. Or intimidating as hell. "Zara Whitmore," he nodded. "You hungry?" She blinked. "What? I was going to order food. You've been here all day, right?" "Oh, yeah, I mean I can feed myself. It's not Zara," he said, his voice low and firm. "I'm ordering." "Do you want anything or not?" She hesitated. Then nodded. "Okay, sure." He picked up the phone, rattled off some order in fluent Italian, then hung up without asking the price. "Of course." She tried not to gape, but he caught her expression anyway. "I take it you're not used to this kind of place." "Is it that obvious?" "You looked impressed by the closet," he said, walking over and leaning against the counter, arms crossed. "I've seen walk-in closets before," she replied, defensive. "Not like that one." She shrugged. "Okay, fair." He studied her for a moment. "So what do you do?" "I'm a writer." That made him tilt his head slightly. "Published? Not yet, but you're trying." I'm trying not to let myself drown in doubt and deadlines and debt, she said, surprised by her own honesty. He didn't laugh. He didn't brush it off. He just nodded like he understood. The food arrived quickly, of course it did, and they sat at the long dining table, Bentley curled up at their feet. Zara hadn't expected to be eating truffle gnocchi and sipping wine with a billionaire on a Friday night, but somehow it didn't feel awkward. Lachlan wasn't exactly warm, but he wasn't cold either. He was observant, quiet, intense. "You're not like I expected," she said later, pushing her plate aside. "What did you expect? A rich guy with too much money and no personality." He gave her a look. And now she hesitated. Still rich, still too much money, but maybe a little personality. He chuckled. "I'll take that." They talked until midnight, nothing too personal but enough that she started seeing the man behind the money. He asked about her writing. She asked about his work. He said investments, but didn't elaborate. She didn't push. When she finally stood, she felt something shift. "I should probably go to bed," she said. "Let you have your house back." He didn't move. "You're welcome to stay the weekend if you still want to." She met his eyes. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "Bentley likes you," she laughed. "Well, can't argue with that." As she walked away, she felt his gaze follow her, and for the first time in weeks, her chest didn't feel quite so tight. She had no idea what she'd just stepped into, but something told her this weekend was going to change everything. Zara woke to the sound of waves crashing beyond the glass wall of the bedroom and sunlight spilling across the sheets like liquid gold. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then her eyes landed on the sleek modern furniture and the water that stretched endlessly past the bluff. Right. Lachlan's house. Or rather, the mansion she was supposed to be watching for a weekend that had suddenly turned into something else entirely. She dressed quickly, pulling on jeans and a soft sweater, then padded barefoot down the hallway. The scent of espresso hit her before she reached the kitchen. Lachlan stood at the stove, one hand resting on the counter while the other stirred something in a pan. He wore a navy sweater and dark slacks, sleeves pushed up to his elbows, hair still damp from a shower. "You cook?" Zara asked, leaning against the doorway. He didn't look over. "I eat." "Occasionally that requires effort." She stepped into the kitchen, her eyes landing on the skillet. "That looks like actual food, not just eggs." "French omelet," he said. "Want one?" She blinked. "Seriously," he finally glanced at her. "You're still here. You said I could stay." "I meant it." Zara crossed her arms, watching him fold the omelet like it was no big deal. What kind of billionaire makes his own breakfast, the kind who doesn't like people in his kitchen at 8 in the morning? She laughed under her breath. "Fair enough." He slid a plate toward her. "You'll need to earn yours." She raised an eyebrow. "How? Tell me something true." Zara hesitated, then sat at the island. "I once got kicked out of a bookstore for hiding rejection letters in the self-help section." He looked at her, amused. "That's either genius or deeply unhinged." "Maybe both." They ate in silence for a minute, the kind that didn't feel strained. Zara studied him while he poured water into a glass carafe. There was a stillness to him, like he was always calculating beneath the surface, but not cold, just contained. "So," she said, "what exactly do you do when you're not jetting around the world or making suspiciously perfect omelets?" He didn't answer right away. "Then, I build companies, tear down the broken parts, rebuild them." She tilted her head. "That sounds intense." "It's necessary." She waited. He didn't elaborate. "Do they always listen to you?" "They do if they want to succeed." Zara studied him. "And if they don't?" He met her eyes. "Then I walk away." There was something final in the way he said it, something that told her he didn't do second chances. She set her fork down. "Must be nice, having that kind of power." "It's not about power. It's about control." "Same thing, isn't it?" He didn't answer, but his jaw shifted slightly. Zara changed the subject. "So what happens now? Are we awkward roommates for the rest of the weekend?" He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "That depends." "On what?" "Whether you're planning to keep snooping through my closet." Her eyes widened. "You saw that? I have cameras in the hallway." Zara groaned. "That's mortifying." He gave her a look. "Could be worse. You didn't steal anything." "Wow. What a compliment." She stood, carrying her plate to the sink, but he took it from her and rinsed it himself, setting it gently in the dishwasher. Zara leaned against the island, watching. You really don't like people doing things for you, do you? I don't like incompetence. And you assume everyone else is incompetent. Experience has taught me to. She was quiet for a second. That's a lonely way to live. He looked over at her and something flickered across his face, something almost guarded, like she'd hit a nerve. I'm not lonely, he said simply. She didn't push, but she didn't believe him either. Later that afternoon, Zara wandered out to the edge of the pool deck, notebook in hand. The ocean stretched endlessly beyond the glass railing, wind teasing her hair. She tried to write, but the words wouldn't come. Every sentence felt hollow. You're staring at that page like it insulted you, Lachlan said from behind her. She turned, surprised to see him dressed in a charcoal t-shirt and jeans, barefoot, holding a glass of something amber. I'm trying to write, she said. It's not going well. He walked over and sat on the lounge chair beside her. Why not? Maybe because I'm too distracted by the fact that this feels like a dream I'm going to wake up from. He said nothing, just took a sip of his drink. Zara looked at him. You ever feel like your life doesn't belong to you? He considered that. No, but I felt like I built something only to realize it wasn't what I actually wanted. She blinked. What did you want? He didn't speak for a long time. Then, something real. The wind picked up. Zara closed her notebook. Was there someone before? She asked quietly. Yes. Did she leave? She asked me to choose between her and the life I'd built. Zara looked at him. And you chose the life. He didn't answer, but that told her everything. They sat in silence, the ocean roaring below them. She must have loved you a lot, Zara said. She did. And you? I wasn't ready, she nodded slowly, then stood. Maybe you should figure out what you are ready for. She walked back toward the house, heart pounding harder than it should have. As she reached the glass doors, she heard his voice behind her. Zara, she turned. I wasn't expecting you. Neither was I. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, every word he'd said echoing in her mind. She'd come here to escape her own chaos. Not to get tangled in someone else's, but something was happening, something she hadn't planned on, and it wasn't just about attraction. It was about the way he looked at her like he saw beneath the surface, the way he listened without judgment, the way he'd said her name. She rolled over, heart pounding. She needed to be careful, because if she wasn't, she might not want to leave when the weekend ended, and something told her. He might not want her to. Zara found him on the terrace just after sunset, seated at the edge of a low stone wall that overlooked the descending cliffs. The sky was a bruised blend of lavender and ash, and the ocean below churned with a quiet fury that matched the restless energy in her chest. She hadn't meant to look for him. She'd told herself to stay in the guest wing, to read or write or do anything other than follow the pull that had only grown stronger over the last 24 hours. But the truth was, she couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd looked at her earlier. Like he was on the edge of admitting something he didn't yet understand. He didn't turn when she approached, but something in his posture shifted, not tense, exactly, but alert. You don't sleep much, do you? She asked, stepping beside the wall. I sleep fine, Lachlan replied, gaze never leaving the horizon. Just not when I have things on my mind. Zara sat beside him, pulling her knees up to her chest. And do you? A pause. Lately, too much. She glanced at him, the side of his face lit by the dying light. He looked younger in this glow, less guarded, less carved by steel. Is it about her? She asked. He didn't ask who she meant. No, not anymore, Zara hesitated. Then, what is it then? He took a long breath, then looked at her. You, the air shifted, Zara's throat went dry. Me? You walk into my home like it's borrowed but treat it like it's yours. You talk to me like I'm just some guy who happens to make passable omelets instead of someone who owns 3 international holding companies. You didn't flinch when I told you I'd walked away from someone who loved me. You didn't try to fix it, you just listened. She wasn't sure what to say, her chest tightened and she looked away, unsure how to meet that kind of clarity. I didn't come here to be noticed, she said quietly. I didn't expect to notice you, he said. They sat in silence, the kind that buzzed beneath their skin. The tide crashed below, slow and rhythmic. "I'm not good at this," Lachlan said after a moment. "The personal part. I've spent years building walls and calling them strategy." Zara looked at him. "You don't have to apologize for not being someone else." "I'm not apologizing," he said. "I'm telling you I don't want to miss something because I was too stubborn to admit I cared." Her heart thudded, loud in her ears. "You barely know me. I've had people in my life for years who never made me feel anything close to what I feel when I look at you." Zara stood abruptly, the weight of his words too much all at once. "This isn't what I came here for." Lachlan stood too. "Neither did I." She shook her head, backing a step toward the glass doors. "I'm just trying to figure out my life. I don't even know what I want tomorrow to look like, let alone next week." "I'm not asking for next week," he said. "I'm asking for right now." Zara's hands curled into fists at her sides. "I can't afford to get wrapped up in someone like you. You live in a world I don't understand. Then let me show it to you, not the money, not the houses or the jets. Just me." She stared at him, heart a storm behind her ribs. "Why?" she whispered. "Because I can't stop thinking about you," he said. "And I'm tired of pretending that I can." Zara looked away, blinking against the flood of emotion. Then quietly, "I need to clear my head." She turned and walked inside. He didn't follow. Instead of going to her room, she grabbed her sneakers and slipped out the side door. The coastal path was lit only by the moon and the soft glow of recessed lights along the stone steps. The air was cool, the wind sharp against her skin. She walked fast, trying to outpace the thoughts clawing at her mind. She hadn't come here to be seen. She'd come here to escape, to breathe, to remember who she was outside of the noise. But Lachlan made her feel like she wasn't invisible. Like she wasn't just a girl with a failing bank account and half-finished manuscripts. He made her feel real. She followed the path down the slope until the house was just a glimmer above. When she finally stopped, her breath heavy, she sat on a boulder and stared out at the sea. She didn't know how long she stayed there. Long enough for the wind to numb her fingers and her thoughts to slow. When she got back, the terrace was empty. The lights inside were dimmed. She climbed the stairs quietly, intending to slip into her room unnoticed, but the door to the study was open. And Lachlan was inside. He was seated at an old-fashioned desk, a single lamp casting shadows across his face. In front of him sat a thin stack of papers, a pen resting in his hand. She lingered in the doorway. "You're still up." He didn't look up. "I'm writing something I should have written a long time ago." She stepped inside, curiosity getting the better of her. "What is it?" He slid the paper toward her. She picked it up and saw her name typed at the top. It was a contract. Zara Whitmore, creative consultant, freelance development editor. She looked at him, stunned. "You said you've been trying to make a career out of writing, but no one will take a chance on you." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I didn't say that." "Not out loud." "You didn't have to." She stared at the document. "What is this?" "A real opportunity, not a handout. You'd review manuscripts for a publishing startup I'm launching, help shape new voices, build something that's yours." She swallowed hard. "Why would you do this?" "Because I believe in you," he said, "and because I'd rather give you a reason to stay than watch you walk out of my life when the weekend ends." Zara set the paper down slowly. "You don't even know if I'm any good." "I know you're real," he said. "And that's more than I can say for most of the people in my world." She stared at him, every part of her trembling with something she couldn't name. "I need to think," she said. He nodded. "Take all the time you need, but know this: I'm not offering this because I pity you. I'm offering it because I see you." She turned and walked out of the room, the contract still clutched in her hand. Upstairs, she sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the paper. Her fingers traced the letters of her name. This wasn't just about a job, it was about trust, about being seen. About someone powerful and untouchable offering her something no one else ever had a chance. And that terrified her more than anything, because part of her wanted to believe him, and the other part already did. It was almost noon when Zara finally came downstairs, the contract still folded but untouched. Her pulse hadn't slowed since she'd read her name on that offer, and her mind hadn't stopped racing since. She found Lachlan out back, seated beneath the pergola near the garden, a thick binder open in front of him and a phone pressed to his ear. He was dressed in slate-gray slacks and a black shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms, a gold watch glinting under the sun. He glanced up when she approached, his expression unreadable. "I'll call you back," he said into the phone before setting it aside and closing the binder. Zara lowered herself into the opposite chair, the coastal breeze tugging at strands of her hair. She set the folded contract on the table between them. "I rate it," she said. "I assumed. I still don't know what to say. Say whatever's true," she hesitated. "I want to accept it. But I don't want it to come with strings." "It doesn't. That's easy to say." Lachlan leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. "You think I'm offering you this because of what's happened between us. Shouldn't I?" He considered her for a moment. "If you'd shown up here and turned out to be talentless, I wouldn't have bothered, but you're not. You're sharp. You have instincts most people spend years trying to fake. That's worth investing in." Zara's lips parted, but no words came out. He continued, "Take the offer or don't. But don't insult yourself by pretending you haven't earned it." She blinked hard, throat tightening. "I don't know how to be in your world." "Then don't be," he said. "Be in mine." She looked at him, heart slamming into her ribs. "That sounds like the same thing." "It's not. My world is whatever I choose to make it. I'm offering you a place in it." Zara stood abruptly, her emotions too raw to sit still. She walked to the edge of the garden, staring out at the view. The Pacific shimmered under the sun, striking and endless. "I've spent years trying to make something of myself," she said without turning. "And in the space of 2 days, you've managed to undo everything I thought I knew." "I didn't mean to undo you." "No," she said, turning back. "You meant to make space for me. And I don't know if I'm brave enough to take it." Lachlan rose, walking toward her slowly. "Then let me help you be." She stared at him, skin buzzing with the intensity he always carried. "You're not supposed to say things like that." "Why not?" "Because it makes it harder to walk away." His voice softened. "Then don't." It was the way he looked at her, like she wasn't a passing moment but a choice, a deliberate, grounded choice. She exhaled shakily. "What happens if I say yes?" "Then you move into the guest house at the end of the property," he said. "We work together, you get paid, you build your career, and we figure out the rest at a pace that keeps you breathing." Zara's brows lifted. "You already thought this through?" "I had the staff clean it this morning." That made her laugh, sharp and full of disbelief. "You're serious?" "I'm not in the habit of offering half measures." She shook her head. "You really don't do anything small, do you?" "Not when it matters." She bit her lip, then looked back at the view. "How do you know this isn't just a weekend thing? That you won't wake up in 2 days and decide I'm a complication you don't need? Because I've never been more certain of anything in my life." Zara turned slowly, overwhelmed by the steadiness in his gaze. "I'm still scared." "I didn't ask you not to be." She inhaled deeply, heart racing. "Then I guess I'm saying yes." Lachlan stepped forward, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, but he didn't touch her. "To which part?" "All of it." His hand brushed her cheek, slow and reverent. "Then I'll give you everything I have, no conditions, no timelines. Just honesty." Zara tilted her face into his palm, eyes closing. "You're going to ruin me." "No," he whispered. "I'm going to rebuild you." He kissed her there under the cloudless sky, with the ocean wind circling them and sunlight painting his skin gold. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't hesitant. It was a promise. Later that evening, Lachlan took her to dinner, not just anywhere but to a rooftop restaurant in downtown Los Angeles that didn't exist on public maps. They arrived in a sleek black car driven by a man who knew not to speak. The elevator required a key card. The staff greeted Lachlan by name. The moment they stepped onto the rooftop, Zara's breath caught. A single table stood beneath a canopy of soft lights with a string quartet playing on a platform nearby. The skyline glittered around them. There were no other guests. "You rented the whole place out. I wanted you to see the city without the noise. This is insane. It's intentional." She wore a midnight blue dress he'd had delivered earlier that afternoon, hanging from her bedroom door with a note that read, "No pressure. But I'd like to see you in this." Now, with the wind teasing the hem and the skyline burning behind her, she felt like someone else entirely. Someone possible. Over dinner, they didn't talk about contracts or careers. They talked about childhood memories, about books they'd loved, about places they wanted to see. Zara told him about her mother's old typewriter, the one she'd taught herself to use at 10. Lachlan told her about his first failed company, how he'd lost nearly everything and rebuilt it from scratch. "You really don't believe in failure," she said. "I believe in starting again." When dessert came, a delicate chocolate soufflé, he reached across the table and took her hand. "I've spent years building an empire," he said. "None of it means anything if I'm building it alone." Zara stared at him, her fingers laced with his. "Then maybe it's time to start building something together." That night, back at the estate, he walked her to the guest house. The space was warm and elegant, with high ceilings, its own garden, and a cozy office with a desk already waiting. "You planned this," she said, spinning slowly in the center of the room. "I prepared for the possibility." She stepped toward him. "You're not the man I expected. You're not the woman I thought I'd fall for." She stopped breathing. "Did you just say, 'I'm in love with you'?" he said simply, her heart cracked open. "Already. Completely." She framed his face with her hands and kissed him like she'd been waiting her whole life to find something this impossible and real. And when he pulled her into his arms and whispered her name like a vow, Zara knew she wasn't house-sitting anymore. She was home. The contract was signed. The guest house was hers. And for the first time in 2 years, Zara felt like her life was moving forward instead of just surviving the inertia of disappointment. A week had passed since she said yes to the job, to Lachlan, to all of it, and each day had felt like stepping deeper into a life she'd never imagined she'd have the courage to live. The mornings began with fresh coffee already made in the kitchen, sometimes by Lachlan, sometimes by the silent housekeeper who came and went unnoticed. The days were filled with manuscript evaluations and meetings with a small, hand-picked team. Lachlan had quietly assembled one that was already bustling with energy for the boutique publishing house they were co-launching. On Friday, Lachlan walked into her office unannounced, holding 2 helmets and a spark in his eyes she hadn't seen before. "You trust me?" he asked. "Not with passwords or secrets," she said, eyeing the helmets, "but I'll risk a concussion." He handed her one. "We're going north. Dress warm." They rode up the coast on a vintage motorcycle, the wind whipping past them as the Pacific glittered beside the road. Lachlan didn't say where they were going, and she didn't ask. She held onto him tightly and let the world blur. They stopped in a small town she didn't recognize, where a weathered bookstore sat between a bakery and an antique shop. Inside, it smelled like old pages and dusted sunlight. The owner, a woman in her 60s with silver braids and a voice like velvet, greeted Lachlan with a knowing smile. "Didn't expect to see you again," she said. "I wasn't planning on it," Lachlan replied, "but she's a writer." The woman turned to Zara. "Then you belong here." Zara wandered the shelves, fingers brushing bindings worn with time. It was nothing like the digital, high-volume world she'd left behind. This place was curated, deliberate. She found a first edition of a novel she'd read as a teenager, and when she reached the counter, Lachlan was already paying. "I didn't ask for this," she said quietly. "I know. That's why it matters." On the ride back, she leaned into him, her cheek pressed to his shoulder. She didn't say it out loud, but she didn't need to. He felt it in the way she held him tighter now than she had on the way there. That night, she found him on the balcony outside the main house, barefoot, sleeves rolled, reading something on his tablet. "You're always reading," she said, stepping beside him. "I'm adjusting," he replied. "You've made books more personal." She rested her arms on the railing. "Did you ever think you'd end up with someone like me?" "No," he said without hesitation. "But not because I didn't want to, because I didn't know someone like you existed." She turned to him, her voice softer. "Is this still real to you? It's more real than anything I've built. She touched his face gently. Then I guess we're both rebuilding. They kissed again, not with desperation, but with certainty. A slow, anchored kiss that said this wasn't a firework, it was a sunrise. 2 months later, the publishing house launched with 3 debut authors, one of whom Zara had discovered in a slush pile. The reviews were glowing. The buzz was real. And Zara was no longer just surviving, she was creating. They hosted the launch party in the art gallery Lachlan owned downtown. She wore a sleek green dress and heels she'd never have picked for herself until Lachlan had said, "That one. It matches the way you look when you finish a chapter." When she stepped into the gallery, the crowd quieted. Not because of her dress, not because of Lachlan's hand on her lower back, but because she radiated something unshakable now: purpose, confidence, joy. Halfway through the evening, Lachlan tapped his glass once. "I'd like to make a toast," he said, the room falling silent. Zara's stomach flipped. He looked at her, his voice steady. "To the woman who walked into my life without permission and changed everything I thought I understood about success. You challenged me, you grounded me, and you made me believe in things I hadn't dared to want. So tonight, I raise a glass not just to our company, but to the reason I finally know what it means to build something that lasts." She couldn't breathe for a moment. Then she kissed him in front of everyone. Later, when the guests had thinned and the music faded, they walked hand in hand onto the rooftop. String lights swayed above them and the city twinkled below. "I have one more surprise," Lachlan said, pulling a box from his pocket. Zara froze. "I wasn't planning this tonight," he admitted. "But I realized I don't need perfect timing, I just need you." He opened the box. Inside was a band of platinum, simple and elegant, with a small emerald nestled in gold. "Marry me, Zara." She stared at the ring, then at the man who had once been a stranger in his own kitchen. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." They married 3 months later in the garden overlooking the sea, with only 20 people in attendance and Bentley trotting down the aisle with a velvet ribbon around his neck. Zara wore a dress with floating sleeves and no veil. Lachlan wore a gray suit and a look in his eyes that made everyone believe in forever. After the ceremony, as the sun dipped below the water, he pulled her close. "I was never looking for love," he said into her ear, "but I found you. And now, I don't remember what life was like before." She smiled against his chest. "Then let's never look back." Their life unfolded in a rhythm that was theirs alone: mornings filled with words, afternoons with laughter, and nights with arms wrapped around each other in a world neither of them had ever expected to build. Years later, in the same study where he'd once offered her a contract, Zara glanced up from a manuscript to see Lachlan watching her from the doorway. "You still stare," she said. "You still ruin me," he replied. And in that house by the sea, where love had walked in uninvited and stayed for good, they lived with the kind of certainty most people only dream of, together. Always.